Hello, everyone. I wanted to let all of our wonderful listeners know just how much we have appreciated their support over the past year. We'd especially like to thank all of our Patreon members who go the extra mile by making financial donations that have allowed us to keep the show on the air for the past 5 years. In those past 5 years, we've released nearly 400 episodes, garnering nearly 3 million downloads, which is only possible because of listeners like you. While my team and I are on a much-needed holiday break this week and next, we wanted to share with all of our listeners a couple of our episodes, which were previously only available to our patrons. Today, you'll be hearing from our former guest, musician Jolie Holland, who dives deeper into the cult dynamics inherent in her recently released album, Haunted Mountain. If you are not a patron yet and would like to access nearly 50 other bonus episodes, please consider becoming a member for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/IndoctriNation. You can find a link in the show notes to this episode. If you are already a member, thanks again for your support, and please take a look through our feed of hundreds of episodes and see if there's one that you may have missed. As a patron, you also have exclusive access to our first 50 episodes, which are only available on Patreon. You can access those episodes under the Collections tab in Patreon or simply follow the link in the show notes of this episode. Thanks for tuning in to our Patreon exclusive bonus episode. Listeners like you are the reason we keep the show going, so thanks so much for your support. And enjoy this bonus interview as our thanks to you. I am so happy to be able to provide another wonderful show for our supporters, for the people who take the time, make the effort, and are generous in supporting what we do to keep it on the air and to keep it available for other people who want to be able to come on and talk, and also for people who just really want to hear about what other people have been through and how they've gotten through it. And so it's a special treat today to have my guest. So to our lovely Patreon supporters, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jolie Holland.
And part of the reason we're going to be talking today is not only because of your history and some of the things that you've been through, some of the things that you've needed to be able to understand, and some of the things that are hard to understand that people try to understand throughout a lifetime, I think, to see how they impacted you, but also because you have this wonderful gift. You are able to create music, and you are very talented, and you have actually come out with a new album. And I'd love you to spend a moment talking about the album, and then we'll get into it in more depth.
I wrote some of these songs with my friend Buck Meek, who's in the band Big Thief. It was great to be able to have that kind of collaboration with him. That was super fun. I produced it as a trio, which was really interesting. I'd never done that before. It was with two of my long-term collaborators, Adam Brisbane and Justin Veloso. And we did most of it in the middle of nowhere in this it's not the middle of nowhere now, but it really used to be. It was in the off season for rock climbers. It's a place called Smith Rock, which is, I don't climb. So I had never heard of it, but our friend's grandfather bought land there when it was worthless. And then now it's a rock climbing mecca. He's a musician and he started this beautiful studio out there. So we were in view of all the incredible rock formations. It was so great. And a herd of deer would go to sleep outside one of the windows every night. It was incredibly isolated.
Wow, that's amazing. Quite beautiful. I know a lot of people who are artists find environments to be in that help them sort of quiet their minds or are able to let their creative juices flow. There are a lot of people who find nature to be a wonderful collaborator to their music. And so I'm really glad that you got to explore somewhere new, somewhere quiet and remote. What did it provide for you being in that space?
I've made a couple records out in the middle of nowhere before, and you're giving the band a case of cabin fever, basically. You're just like, everybody's like isolated and there's no restaurants. You all have to cook for each other. So that was really cute. And people were, sharing kind of like family recipes and that kind of thing. Like the engineer is a French guy, Octave Zangs. First of all, his first name is Octave. Such a cool musical name.
So I remember watching the documentary that came out pretty recently about Neil Young. It was such a good documentary. You get to really know him and see him now, but also how he's reflecting back on the time that he did these barn recordings and what it was like just to be, on his land in the country, but also be in an actual barn doing the recordings and how it changes the feeling and changes the music to a certain degree, just the sound, the overall sound. It's very cool.
There's a song on the record called Feet on the Ground. I'm trying to create a new project for myself that's anti-patriarchal dance music. And I think about like other people who are doing similar stuff like Pussy Riot and Anani and La Tigra and like, I don't know, I'm just like trying to approach it for myself. Like I always try to redefine what protest music means. And the drum track on that was all about barn sound. Like we reamped a drum machine and then played it in the barn and then recorded that.
Every man, woman, and person on the spectrum to the revolution is living in a system of exploitation that's a given.
Feet on the Ground is a really important song for me. It's the first foray into dance music, and it's really inspired by this William Onyebar song called Better Change Your Mind. It's really modeled after his song, and it's a dance song, but it's discursive. It's a party song, but it's like meant as like part of an important conversation.
America, do you ever think this world is yours? Eh? And you, Russia, yeah, do you ever think this world is yours? You, China, do you ever think this world is yours?
One of You is the first way that I was trying to write Feet on the Ground. Like I was trying to write an anti-patriarchal song, kind of like a protest song from the inside out that's not confrontational, but more intended as like a transformational song. It's really interesting to me the way it happened. Like I was trying to come up with images that have that kind of power for me. And I read Jerzy Kosinski's book, Painted Bird, when I was 13. That song just like appeared to me. Like I wrote it in 15 minutes. So it's like this really interesting, almost like dream response to the idea of like, how do you talk about how dangerous sexism is? Like how do you talk about how dangerous racism is? And the image is just so brutal, and yeah, I just really zoomed in on the central image in that book. The book really tortured me. I really wish that I hadn't read it when I was 13. It was really like a lot of very violent sexual scenes. It really scarred me. I literally read it because there was like a cool illustration of a bird on it. And then once I started reading it, I couldn't stop because it's so intense. It's the story of this little Polish kid, blonde-haired kid who is not immediately perceptible as being Jewish. And he's like walking out of rural Poland in the aftermath of the Holocaust. And he keeps encountering these horrible scenes. And one of them, he watches these two country boys that are trapping birds and then painting them all the wrong colors and then releasing them to their flock and then watching the flock kill them. So it's like this very basic picture about the dangers of disinformation and othering.
Just like a soundscape, wrote a terrifying book about some horrible hicks who trapped a little bird just for kicks, and they painted it in colors unfamiliar to its kind. Red, dripping over.
It's so interesting thinking about like how even the very finest shades of othering create so much danger.
Blue, seeping into the black. Yellow, where the gray should be.
For the other interview for the general public, we get into more of your history and more of the cultic themes, coercion themes, manipulation themes. But I know that we are a product of our lives and of our childhoods, of our experiences, of our traumas, of our victories. So it's going to be woven in ways that you're aware of and maybe even not to a great degree, as we all are.
Or mostly that you're not aware of.
Right.
You know, as somebody whose job it is to explore, you know, poetry and like this kind of like psychological art of songwriting, I feel like it's part of why my family hates me, you know? They're just like, shut up about that. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to think about that, but it's, you know, it's my orientation. And I had this thought last night after we'd been up late with my partner and his broken toe, and like a 4 a.m. thought, like just being really aware of how my upbringing was just all about self-hate is good. Just really hearing that I was raised with like self-hatred as a positive quality. I think like those sort of awarenesses really come out of putting yourself in a radically different space. It's like I'm here with my partner, like we're dealing with like nonsense of life and like just him, you know, getting this injury, just dealing with real stuff in a loving, realistic way, you know, instead of the kind of bullshit that I was raised with, the sort of like worrying about this imaginary future time and like allowing our lives to be poisoned by that. That's such a Jehovah's Witness thing, right? And, you know, lots of other cults operate on the same kind of metric of like, the future is more important. Like this imaginary place is more important than what's happening right now.
Right. So we're going to be able to explore that more at another time. But I know that there is something that permeates everything that we do. And as you're saying, you know, just in ways that you might not know to a great degree. But I think that there are these themes that are going to pop up. And especially if, as you're saying, that, you know, self-hatred is good, there are a lot of cultic groups that talk about suffering being of value. And I really think, that's a way they get away with making people suffer. It is a very powerful message to people who are already suffering that they are sort of doing it the way that God wants, and they're going to be rewarded for that in their life to come, which is very interesting. So I think there's a solace, kind of a salve to that for people who really have a very, very hard life. But for people who had the potential to have an okay life, but are really made to suffer and then are really thinking that's the way they're supposed to be, then what is the motivator to make a better life or to be happy? And I talk to a lot of people who become happy and then stop themselves because they're really worried about the happiness and what that means about them, or if God is still going to be happy with them if they're happy.
But like start flinching, like, oh,
Right.
what's gonna happen if I'm happy? God's gonna hate me.
Right. Yes. And there are all these adages about how when you're enjoying yourself, when you're laughing, that's when the devil's going to get you, so people do learn to be on guard. I'm wondering, just to focus particularly on your album, but I really want people to have a sense of you and your life as it moved into being a musical life, because there is something about being raised many generations into a cult, into Jehovah's Witness. I'm wondering at what age you got interested in music, and what was your first foray into it? Was it through an instrument? Was it through your voice? What happened?
I'm just musically oriented. Like, I never had classes in school. I was in orchestra, but like I didn't get like a lot of meaningful education there. My teacher was about to retire. She was going deaf, and I helped tune the instruments in the whole class. This is such a blessing. She couldn't hear me, so she didn't know that I was improvising like almost the entire time because the music was so boring, right? But I mean, it's also sad because like I didn't have anybody to kind of like pull me along, And my parents, they're waiting for the end of the world. So like they weren't. And like, in the cult Jehovah's Witness that I was raised in, like if I wasn't a housewife, then nobody cared what I was doing. Like if I wasn't a housewife, then anything I was doing was shameful. So no support. And I still have to fight this sense of like, if I do something well, people will hate me, which is of course true. I mean, like there's gonna be like nasty, like jealous haters. But like for me, it's like this very existential thing of like, if I succeed, I will lose my most beloved people, right? That's like, unfortunately, that's like a very basic thing that I learned. So I really do have to like watch out for repercussions in my life. If like I need to make sure I'm never listening to that voice. Yeah, so I was first viola, and without, really reading from the page, which is, I feel so sorry for the entire viola section if they were trying to follow me. And it was just always this place of solace because like nobody cared, because like I already wasn't doing the thing I was supposed to be doing. And at least I wasn't, fighting with my sister or something. So like I would just go to my room and play music. That was my coping mechanism.
Right. So a lot of people who get started in music, they talk about it being their solace, their place where they can retreat to. The thing that also sometimes drowns out other sounds, fighting in the house, fighting in your head. It gives you a place to hear sounds that are much more pleasurable, and also that you have mastery over, that they're of your creation. And I wonder how much music was able to do that for you.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. I would go out and get lost a lot too. We lived in these like massive suburbs on the outskirts of Houston, and the hilarious thing about Houston is like there's these giant drainage ditches everywhere, and they call them bayous. They're like concrete ditches, but there's still a lot of wildlife out there. It's still pretty amazing. So I just like go outside and fucking write songs.
And it's also a point of connection. So once you do that, you meet other people who do that. And also sometimes people just want to hear you do it, so they connect with you.
Yeah, I remember the little pack of weirdos. There was my first boyfriend, we kissed each other one time. He was a Mormon. Like he played with like keyboards and stuff, and like yeah, we like pretended we had a band when I was like 13.
That's really fun. Those are great experiences.
Yeah, it was awesome. We lost touch, like, because he was older than me. He's 3 years older than me. So he like went away to other schools really quickly. But he said he kept like all these songs that I wrote until his house burned down. We reconnected later.
But it's really nice that he held on to the music.
Yeah, I wish we'd stayed in touch, but you know, it was weird. I mean, he was he was still dealing with like the Mormon thing, and when we reconnected, I was like, I called him a Jack Mormon, and he was like, no, he's a real Mormon.
Okay, wow. So for the benefit of the bonus episode for the Patreon supporters, I really want them to be able to hear your music and understand what helped to create certain songs, what the messages are that you're wanting to convey, and also for the purposes of this conversation, you know, to point out themes of freedom, of just expressing yourself openly, positive or negative, exploring the world, exploring yourself in a way that you just can't when you are involved in a cult group. So can we go through parts of your album?
Yeah, totally. So there's a bunch of songs on the record that are related to my time as a homeless teenager. That's 100% related to being in a cult, because that's like such a common, unfortunate story for people who are raised in fundamentalist groups. And my publicist and I were talking about it, and like she originally had this kind of press release that she wrote up, said, these songs are about homelessness. And I said, no. That, because it just has this like, I think if you see like an apparently middle-class white lady talking about homelessness, like you immediately think like, oh, this is about policy or something, like this is like this non-profity thing, or so, you know, it's very bloodless, but it's like, that's, you know, I'm not a middle-class white lady. Like it's interesting being able to pass, but like people, you know, because I'm a smarty pants, you know, intellectual, and so like people just assume that I got to go to college. You know, unfortunately, I did not. So there's a lot of songs, like quote about homelessness, but they're not external. It's like it's this you know, from the actual experience of like being on the street and like needing your community, and writing from that perspective. And so the song Highway 72 is definitely a bunch of portraits of that time.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. So from what age to what age-ish were you homeless?
I was getting kicked out of the house a lot from the age of 13. And that's when I came out as queer. And then my family was kind of like kicking me out. Like I would go stay with my mom and go stay with my dad. And I was just like my life was really disrupted in that sense. And then I got kicked out again when I was 17. They let me come back home, and I had a job for a little while and just stayed at the house. And then from 19 to 24, I was extremely rootless. And looking back at it, I think one part of why I lived that way is that I had a lot of PTSD about houses, about like living somewhere. Like even that alone was like really scary. And like I couldn't admit it to myself. And it was also just, you know, where I was coming from just like made it so hard for me to understand like how people do things, right? Like I loved seeing that show Unorthodox. It was like, even though it was like a very different group, it was like seeing her trying to approach normal life and trying to figure out a way to do things was so great. And especially since like she did it as a musician too. She's like, oh, I know, I'll just get accepted at this great music college, you know, and make music friends. But like, I didn't know how to do things. Like nobody prepared me for a life, you know, nobody encouraged me to like do anything practical at all. You know, it's just like, you know, the end of the world will fix everything or whatever kind of bullshit. Like,
right. Okay. So, right. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are raised with apocalyptic thinking. And so there really aren't plans made for the future because future is going to be looking very different or not happening. And so, yeah, a lot of people will say, I had to learn how to balance a checkbook. Right? Just life skills.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I very much did an SD. Like, if you see unorthodox, like, I was like, oh, I know, I'll start a band, and then I went up to British Columbia and started the Be Good Tanyas.
Sometimes I don't know where this dirty road is taking me. Sometimes I don't know the reason why, so I guess I'll keep gambling, lots of moves and lots of rambling. But it's easier than just waiting around to die.
It was a really marginal existence. Like, it was very intense trying to stay up there because, like, I was an illegal alien.
Oh, wow. That's right. Whew, that's very stressful. Okay, so then coming back to this song. So tell us about the song, and also if there's a particular line in it that you want to focus on.
The first line is flying a sign. That's like the phrase in at least, like, you know, Austin, Texas. I remember some kid saying to me, like, I was like, where y'all gonna go? And she's like, we're gonna go fly a sign, you know, like begging for change.
Flying a sign, making dollars and dimes in the golden smog of the afternoon, trying to remember some of Hobo's song, and I won't know where I'm headed till I'm further along.
I played on the street a lot. I played violin on the street, which is like, people don't expect to see a violinist on the street. So that was some decent money occasionally.
Wow. So you taught yourself to play violin.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Where did you get a violin, by the way?
Oh, I'm very good at picking the best terrible violin in a pawn shop.
Got it. Okay. All right. So there you were on the street playing. Okay. So what is the expression about a sign?
Flying a sign.
Flying a sign. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought it was a beautiful phrase.
It really is. It really is. Okay. All right. So anything else about that song before we move on to another one?
There's this great reference to a Friends song in there. I remember the band talking about the verse, and they were saying like that it made them cry every single time they heard it. And they were attempting to change without telling me. They were attempting to create their musical parts. This sounds like alchemy. They were trying to make their musical parts around that verse so that it did not cause you to cry every time you heard it. The lines are great horned owl slipping by the overpass. Kind of feel like every year might be my last. Look to my companions, they've got nothing to say, kicking in my footsteps on the lost highway.
Great horned owl slipping by the overpass. Kinda feel like every year might be my last. Look to my companions, they've got nothing to say.
like the Lost Highway, that's like a reference to the Hank Williams song. And like, as I'm talking about it, I wonder if it was actually a Luke the Drifter song, which was his like very Christian-y guy perspective. He had kind of like a preachery sub character that he did called Luke the Drifter.
I'm a rolling stone, all alone and lost, for a life of sin I have paid the cost. When I pass by, all the people say, just another guy on the lost highway.
Yeah, I think Lost Highway might be a Luke the Drifter song, which is like, you know, they're like sad guy being like, I should be in church right now, you know, or whatever. But it's Lost Highway is really, I feel like it's an important American song, really bleak. And then there's actually a reference to Dante in that verse. So my friend Stefan Jacusko, who's a friend that I made during that time, like the first squat that I ever stayed at was a squat that he stayed at. And we would play music on the street together. And he had this wonderful, like, do-it-yourself kind of attitude. Like, my bridge was messed up and I was like, oh, this is going to cost a lot of money to get fixed. And he was like, let me figure it out. And he taught me how to set a bridge. And he had never done it before. He's just like, he just figured it out. Like he could never afford instruments. So he would just always build them. And then I watched him do that. He would get interested in new musical styles. And then he would just build all the instruments from that world. Like he got really interested in Greek music. And that's kind of where my record Wine Dark Sea has this like references to the Odyssey. And so, you know, he made like all of his basses because he couldn't afford a bass in a store. But so he was like obsessed with Dante's comedy, and he made a 3-album set of Dante's comedy. And he's quoting Dante, who's looking at Virgil, and he's like, I look to my companion. You know, and it's like this idea of like, who are you going through hell with? Yeah, it's so multi-layered. Like, I don't expect anybody to hear all this shit, right? You know, like, but it's in there. Then there's a lot of musical references and a lot of literary references on the record. There's in that song, there's also a reference to the gospel song Further Along.
Farther along, yeah, I will know all about. Yes, sir, Lord. I know farther along, Jesus will understand why.
And that song also references the end of the world. You know, that's another kind of like catastrophic Christian nightmare. You know, it's about like giving up your own sense of like judgment to like be entranced and like keep on keeping on. You know, you can see that in like positive and negative ways. Like Hold On is like, you know, you can see it in the like super scary QAnon way, like where no matter what your horrible leaders are doing, just trust the plan. Or it can be seen as like, yeah, shit is hard. You just got to like stick with your principles and keep on.
Incredible. You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about the whole kind of idea of necessity as the mother of invention. You know, how there are so many people who find a way to create sound or create instruments when they don't have the money to buy, and they need to just have found instruments. Like I'm thinking of Zydeco. I'm thinking of a washboard and a jug and spoons.
That was invented by, I forget his name right now, but Clifton Chenier's brother, because he worked at a machine shop. He invented the thing that goes over your shoulders. Yeah.
Incredible. And I think about the it's interesting, a whole body of music called Terezin after the concentration camp, but music that was created during the Holocaust where people wrote out, or they just did it in their head, but they wanted it to be remembered and they wanted to be able to pass it along to future generations. So they would find just a piece of cloth or paper or underside of a rock and write, scores of music.
I love Messiaen. We just went on a date to go see Messiaen. And my partner, Ben, just did a Messiaen piece on synthesizer.
Wow. That's amazing. So let's keep going with this album, because I guess I want people to get it, and there'll be a way to get it in the show notes. But there is something just about as you're going through it, and I'm seeing the emotion that's coming up, that I could only imagine what it was like to write it and also to need to sing it. So what other songs do you want to highlight for us?
The song Haunted Mountain, I wrote most of the song, and then there's 2 verses and a chorus, and then Buck Meek added the 3rd verse, and I love what he added. That song came out of this feeling of it's definitely told in this very mythical way, where you can look at it as I saw somebody in the press describing it, because Buck recorded a version and I recorded a version, so people have been writing about his more than mine, obviously, because he's a more popular artist. But somebody said about the song that it was from the perspective of a hermit who falls in love with a mountain. That is the kind of surface reading. But for me, it was this almost mythological way to talk about what it feels like to be in community and what it feels like to, I don't know, just belong. I love this phrase from the Torah. I don't know where it's at, but the stones would cry out. It's the sense of that justice is omnipresent, or and almost an animist power, right? That's inherent in everything. Oh my God, I'm all weepy. But but I think that's true in the sense of I love learning about animal sense of morality, and that it is not just a human thing, and that it's also something that you can count on. If you do explain an injustice, people will respond to that. Coming from a totalitarian system, you're taught that that isn't real. You're taught that the only reasonable connection is with these authority figures. And so the image of radical reciprocity, which also comes with the ethos of mutual aid and just community and community care, is the antithesis to that authoritarian vision of the only good things come from some nutty monarchist vision.
I'll drink the water of this haunted mountain, so a younger reflection in the falls. The river rose around me. I was swept up on the eddy, drifted for a mile and nearly drowned.
Okay, so then just in the essence of time, because I want people to be able to hear a little more, but also be able to explore it for themselves too. If you can take us through 1 or 2 more thoughts, ideas, songs.
So Orange Blossoms is definitely a continuation of that idea of there's that phrase, the ground has your back. It's kind of this sense of radical Muslim way of talking about what there's no God but God, what that means, which is there's no reality but reality. There's different ways you could look at that, obviously. But yeah, the song Orange Blossoms is also this continuation of reciprocity of the earth is trying to do its job. Like everybody here is trying to do their job. The bats are trying to do their job. The bees are trying to do their job. Like it's this image of like pollination. And it also reminds me of like realizations that I had when I was a homeless teenager and I was just like losing the indoctrination. And I was just really appreciating being in community with my fellow homeless children and just realizing like that all of that authoritarianism was not necessary. Yeah, the song Orange Blossoms makes some real political statements as well, and like talking about, contrasting this image of like the earth trying to stabilize itself with just scary billionaires doing insane shit, and like talking about wars. And there's this image in the song of that I heard through leftist circles that fascism is like an action movie, and that it's such a simple idea. It's like this guy is going to come in and fix it all.
'Cause we all know how the action movie goes. But back in the real world, we are standing on the precipice. Another single soul on this spinning globe is captive to this dick measuring contest.
Incredible. What other songs do you want to highlight?
Me and My Dream is a really interesting one for me from a cult background. I really honestly dreamed that I had met somebody. It was just so powerful. Like there was literally a date in the dream that I looked back after everything had happened and saw that like my birthday played into the dream, and then my birthday was the day of our first date. And I allowed my kind of like inculcation in magical thinking to like stay in this relationship that got worse and worse and worse. But I thought like, oh, but I dreamed that I met him, so like I should stick it out. I totally like wasted like multiple years just because of a stupid synchronicity. It's amazing. Magical thinking has a body count. Magical thinking is dangerous.
I was too shy to ask you to take that trip with me. Standing in the kitchen, shaking like a leaf, but then like a dream that's coming true. You said it yourself.
What It's Worth is like another one of the pedestrian homeless songs. And there's like this image of like listening for somebody's boots. Like, again, it's just like this expression of like longing for community and the way people need each other. There's some percussion in there that I love. It's 8 cicadas. And it sounds like Nawa music or something. It sounds like these kind of like overlapping rhythms, but it was literally just a recording of cicadas.
Not every word they said I couldn't get it out of my head. Got stuck in the brambles and I tore my shit. Whispered a prayer in the dark. For what it's worth, for what it's worth, I'm looking
from first listen, it would be 100% possible to not hear these themes. Like, I think it's completely possible for other people to just project all kinds of other experiences on them. And I definitely don't mean them just to be about cult stuff, but like, also, it's like, this is my life, like I can't escape my identity as a fourth generation Jehovah's Witness. It's just like so part of my story.
I thought I heard it all before. My heart is so heavy and so hard. Sunburns and strung out on the empty lot. Nobody here but us pigeons and crows. Pigeons and crows sweep through the empty sky. Nobody knows, and you leave no trace on the empty sky.
So I know we need to finish up, but I think it is such a nice treat to have you kind of give us like a backstage pass, sort of open the door to understanding what is behind some of the ideas, behind some of the phrases, and also, just as you were talking, some of the themes throughout and how they were impacted by your childhood, but also just through being on your own. I think having that, at times, that necessary pendulum swing to another extreme where you see yourself being free, making your own decisions, figuring out your own way. And you get to also choose who's in your world, who you want to have walk with you along your path. And that is a very important thing to do. And then eventually, hopefully settling into a life that feels more secure, but also still free in fundamental ways. So thank you so much for letting us know about your process and the thinking behind so much of what you put together on this album. And where can people find it, and where can people find you?
Hopefully the music is available in all the places. If they run out of vinyl in stores or physical copies of things and you want those things, you can get them through my website, which is joliehollandmusic.com. But it should be in stores and all the streaming services as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening to our Patreon bonus episode. Your support is crucial to keeping the show on the air. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter and Instagram for more content and resources. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon.